Hello, my name is Jeannie and I'm one of the ministers at Beeches Baptist Church. It's good to have you with us today. Come with me on a journey. It's a journey that not even lockdown can prevent, because it's a journey back in time, some 3 millennia or so ago, long before the time of Jesus. And we're travelling to Israel. We find ourselves in a group of pilgrims, making our way towards Jerusalem for one of the 3 main festivals of the year. As we look around us, we're surrounded by hills, and we can see on those hills pagan shrines, places where other gods were worshipped and some pretty barbaric things took place. We can also see many rocks and boulders, places where it would be easy for a robber to hide in order to attack our small pilgrim band. But we're going nonetheless, and as we begin our journey, one of our number calls out some words, familiar words to us from our worship book. I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? And then they answer their own question. My help comes from the Lord, who has made heaven and earth. Then someone else picks up the rest of the words, almost spoken like a blessing over the group. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, neither the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Come forward in time a little bit. It's the year 1840, and a young man is setting off on an extraordinary adventure. He's an explorer, but he's also someone who is passionate to share the good news of Jesus with everyone that he encounters, and he's setting off for Africa. At the beginning of his journey, he too uses these same words from Psalm 121. His name? David Livingstone. And here we are, making our own journey through 2020, in the middle of a crisis that none of us could have foreseen at the beginning of the year with all its promise. I wonder for you, what's your biggest fear? Is it your health or those that you love? Is it your job or your business and how it will be at the end of all of this? Or perhaps it's something else, a worry that was pre-existing before any of this began. Whatever it is, take a moment to name it before God. He really understands. So my gentle question is this: where can we fix our eyes? Where will our help come from? This was a pilgrim psalm used at the beginning of journeys, and I love that some Jewish couples pin it to the wall of the delivery room so that it can be like a blessing over a newborn baby beginning their journey of life. And I wonder what the person was looking at who wrote the psalm. Were they looking at the mountains around them, remembering those pagan shrines, and perhaps feeling that the people of God can feel very easily overwhelmed and outnumbered? Perhaps they were looking at those rocks which often hid robbers, and thinking about how dangerous life can be. Whatever it was, they were wise enough to look beyond the mountains to the God who had created them, to realise that God, having made every tree, every plant, every animal, every bird, and indeed us, was the one in whom we could put our trust. There are other things, though, I think the psalm has to teach us. It speaks about how God will not let our foot slip. Now, for those pilgrims who were climbing up about 2,000 feet to get to Jerusalem, that was really important. For them to fall could be very dangerous for them and for the rest of their party. But for us, perhaps, it's interesting to notice that the Bible uses walking as a picture image of what it's like to live out the Christian life, one step at a time. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel very much a toddler as far as living out my Christian life is. And I know that unless God is there to hold me, to help me, to fill me with his Spirit, then I'm going to fall over pretty quickly and make a mess of things. The psalm also goes on to speak about God not slumbering or sleeping. I wonder if you've ever slept through something really important. I have been known to go to sleep in the theatre and miss a punchline in a play. Some years ago, I was telling something incredibly significant to me, to a friend of mine, and pausing for a moment for breath, I looked over to find that actually they'd fallen asleep. Our resources to help one another, however important, are always going to be limited. But God is different. His attention never wanders. He doesn't fall asleep on the job. He's always there, day or night, as we bring our concerns to him. That's amazing, isn't it? What a privilege we have to be able to do that. Then it speaks about God being our shade, and it's sometimes translated shield, at our right hand. Now, in a battle, and sometimes, to be honest, life at the moment feels a bit of a battle, doesn't it? Most people would hold the shield in their left hand and their sword in their right. But what that meant was that the right-hand side was less defended. It was easy for the enemy to come and attack. And so this image of a shield on the right hand was a way of saying that God would be at our most vulnerable place to protect us, like a kind of heavenly bodyguard. It's good to know that in our vulnerability, God is there beside us. The psalm then talks about the sun and the moon. Again, for those pilgrim people, that would have been very significant. They could very easily get burnt in the hot sun. Now, in our British summer, unless it really racks up a bit, that's probably not so very likely. But it's an image too, perhaps, I think, of the things that scorch us in life. The words that are spoken to us that leave us with a sting. Those times when we feel out in the cold or rejected. And God too is watching over those times. He knows about those. And we can ask him to guard our hearts so that anger and cynicism and bitterness don't creep in. So in that way too, God is protecting us. Again, right in the centre of who we are. Now, for me at least, the bit I struggle with in this psalm is where it says that God will keep us from all harm. Because we hear those words and we say, well, it's not true, is it? The people of God do come to harm in all kinds of different ways. In this current crisis, we all know people who have died from the virus. So how does that fit? Well, the Psalms, of course, are full of people crying out to God in their suffering, really honest, raw expressions of pain. And the person who wrote Psalm 121 knew that that suffering did happen for the people of God. But the way that Hebrew poetry is written, the two lines of a verse often are kind of part of each other. So if we read that verse very differently, then it reads that God will keep us from all harm and he will guard our life. Now again, perhaps we need to remember that God sees our lives from the standpoint of eternity. So he will ultimately guard our life, but that may be guarding it as we go from this life to the one to follow. In the end, our lives are safe with God. So the final line of the verse is about our coming and going. Now, there's not much coming and going at the moment with lockdown. It feels more, I guess, as though we don't know if we're coming or going. But God also is there at every transition of our lives. When we get to this week and new things are said about the way ahead in this crisis, God is in that transition. There is nothing that he's not part of, nothing that he's not aware of. He has promised that he will never leave us or forsake us. Now, for the person writing that psalm, they would have been thinking particularly of Jerusalem, where the pilgrims were headed. We have a different specific hill to think of, the hill of Calvary, the place where Jesus stretched out his arms in welcome on the cross. The place that says to us more than anything else that God loves us completely and utterly. We are that precious to him that he gave his son to die for us so that we can have friendship with him. So in the middle of this or any other time, where do we lift our eyes? We lift our eyes to the cross. I hope that during this season there will be many, many opportunities when God can reveal his wonderful, extraordinary, faithful, and permanent everlasting love for you.